Hello.
I never thought I'd find myself caught up in something like this. It wasn't anything I'd mapped out or even daydreamed about. But life has a way of throwing curveballs you don't see coming. It all kicked off on a regular afternoon, the kind that should have just slipped by without a trace. But that day stuck with me. It turned everything upside down. The house was peaceful, with just the soft buzz of the air conditioner and a few birds chirping outside now and then. I'd just tidied up the kitchen when I got this eerie feeling someone was staring at me. Not a quick peek, but a steady, intentional look. I turned around and there was Ethan, my stepson, standing in the doorway. He'd always been a polite guy, the kind who holds doors and says thank you without being nudged. Lately, though, I'd noticed a shift in how he looked at me. At first, I brushed it off as no big deal. He was 24, still figuring out that tricky space between being a kid and a full-grown adult, searching for his place in the world. He'd always been tight with his dad, but with his father away more for work, Ethan had been hanging around me more. I didn't mind the company, but this was different. His stare wasn't just passing, it was deep, like he was trying to read me, waiting to see what I'd do. A strange warmth bloomed in my chest, unsettling but kind of exciting. "You need something, Ethan?" I asked, doing my best to keep my voice even. He paused, then shook his head. "Nah, just lost in thought." Lost in thought about what? I could have pressed him, but deep down, I already knew. And maybe, just maybe, a tiny part of me wanted him to say it out loud. Instead, I turned back to the sink, staring at the soapy bubbles spiraling down the drain. Dinner that night was quiet, or it should have been. The TV murmured softly in the background as I sat across from Ethan at the dining table. I asked about his college classes, what he was planning for the fall. He answered, but there was a new edge in his tone, something sharper than before. I could sense it in how he watched me, like he was holding back, waiting for a crack to slip through. Later, after I'd gone upstairs, there was a knock at my bedroom door. It was late, too late for a casual chat. I hesitated, my breath hitching a little as I opened the door and saw Ethan standing there. He looked like he had something to say but didn't know where to start. He raked a hand through his hair. "I'm not sure what I'm doing here." I didn't either. But I could feel it, we were teetering on the edge of something forbidden, a line we weren't supposed to blur. "Ethan," I said, choosing my words carefully, "this isn't right, I know," he cut in, "but that doesn't change how it feels, does it?" His words hung heavy, electric. I should have stepped back, shut the door, and stopped this before it could take root. But I didn't. I stood there, locked in his gaze, waiting. "Night," he said finally, his voice softer, like he'd come to some quiet decision. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me there with my heart pounding. I shut the door, but sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay there, eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying the intensity in his gaze, the weight in his voice. It was wrong. It was risky. It was something I never should have let happen. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of it. Not even close. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept a wink. The night before kept looping in my head, and I couldn't shake the sense that something between us had shifted for good. I tried to go through my morning routine, hoping if I acted normal, it would all just fade away. But when I walked downstairs and saw Ethan in the kitchen, I knew I was kidding myself. He was leaning against the counter, cradling a coffee mug, staring at me with that same intensity from the night before. "Hey, morning," he said, acting like nothing had changed. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile. I moved deliberately, pouring myself some coffee, careful not to meet his eyes for too long. If I lingered on him, if I let him see the thoughts churning in my mind, I wasn't sure I could pull them back. I sat at the table, hoping some distance would ease the tension. But Ethan didn't leave. Instead, he slid into the chair across from me, sipping his coffee slowly. "You look like you didn't sleep much," he said after a moment. My eyes snapped up, my heart skipping. "What makes you think that?" "I heard you moving around last night. You were up late." His gaze was searching again, making my stomach twist. I kept my cool, forcing a light tone. Just couldn't settle, I guess. Happens sometimes. He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he leaned forward, setting his mug down. Was it because of me? There it was, the question I'd been dreading, the one that could drag me deeper into this mess if I wasn't careful. Ethan, we need to be careful, I said, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were clenched tight. Things might feel off lately, but it's not just a feeling, he cut in. I swallowed hard. That doesn't mean we should do anything about it. He watched me for a long moment, and for a split second, I thought maybe that would be it. Maybe he'd nod, say he got it, and we could go back to normal. But then he stood up, slow and deliberate, and moved toward me. My breath caught as he rested a hand on the back of my chair, his body close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. You don't really mean that, do you? He said softly. My heart was hammering. I needed to stop this, to get up and put space between us, but my body wouldn't move. I just couldn't. His fingers brushed my arm, the lightest touch, and it was like the air in the room changed. Ethan, I whispered, my voice barely there. He held my gaze, waiting for me to give him the go-ahead. And for one heart-stopping, thrilling moment, I almost did. The front door swung open, snapping the moment in two. I pulled back just as my husband walked in, dropping his briefcase with a tired sigh. Hey, Han, he called out. Sorry I'm back so late, traffic was a nightmare. I shot up from my chair, my pulse still racing. You're home early. He grinned and came over to kiss my cheek, completely unaware of the storm that had just been brewing. Meetings ended sooner than I thought. Thought I'd catch you off guard with an early return, my husband said with a grin. That's sweet, I replied, pasting on a smile, though my heart was still racing from what had nearly happened. Ethan had stepped back, his face impossible to read, but the electric tension of that moment still clung to me like a shadow. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I'd shut this down before it could grow. But standing there, with my husband so close, I knew in my gut it was far from over. Not by a long shot. That evening, I did everything I could to steer clear of Ethan. Every time his eyes met mine, I worried my husband would somehow sense it, like the near miss we'd had was scrawled across my face. I threw myself into kitchen chores, chopping carrots, stirring pots, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind distracted. But Ethan's presence was like a weight in the room, his attention always hovering near me, impossible to ignore. Dinner was subdued. My husband, clueless about the undercurrent, rambled on about his meetings, work headaches, and weekend plans. Ethan barely said a word, giving short answers while nudging his food around his plate. I wasn't much better, my thoughts were a mess, my body on edge, hyper-aware of him sitting just across from me. After dinner, my husband flopped onto the couch, worn out from his day, lazily flipping through TV channels. I slipped into the kitchen, claiming I needed to clean up, but really, I just needed a moment to breathe. Alone, I gripped the counter's edge, letting out a shaky breath. I needed distance, clarity, something to ground me. But none of that came. I sensed Ethan before I heard him, that subtle shift in the air that sent a chill through me. I didn't turn, but I knew he was there. We've got to talk, he said, his voice low and quiet. Not now, I whispered, clutching the dish towel tighter. But his voice came again, soft but insistent, closer than before. This is a mistake, I murmured, barely loud enough to hear. We need to let it go. You don't really think that, he said, stepping nearer. I can see it in your eyes. I squeezed my eyes shut, begging myself to find the strength to push him away, to stop this before it went too far. But when I turned to face him, my words stuck. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something intense, something dangerous, a dare. Ethan. A burst of laughter from the living room stopped us cold. My husband was chuckling at some TV show, completely unaware of the storm brewing just steps away. The moment shattered, and I let out a trembling breath, stepping back. Go to bed, I said firmly. This is done. He hesitated, his jaw clenching, but after a long pause, he gave a slight nod and walked away without a word, vanishing up the stairs. I sagged against the counter, my heart pounding. I'd drawn a line, put an end to it. But deep down, I knew that line was already fraying the second I let myself consider what could have been. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Ethan was always around, a constant reminder of what we'd almost done. He didn't push or corner me again, but the silence between us was thick, loaded with things we weren't saying. On Tuesday, my husband left for another work trip, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek before grabbing his suitcase. "Call if you need me," he said with a warm smile. I nodded, forcing a grin. "Will do. Safe travels." The second the door clicked shut, I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. Then I felt it, that heavy sensation of being watched. I turned, and there was Ethan, standing at the base of the stairs. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The silence stretched, heavy with all the things we weren't brave enough to voice. In that moment, I knew I was teetering on the brink of something I couldn't undo, and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to stop myself from falling. With my husband gone, the house felt different, too quiet, charged with an unspoken expectation. I knew Ethan was still there, but he hadn't spoken since that morning. The tension between us had only grown, silent but undeniable, hanging in the air like a pull towards something I knew I shouldn't crave. I tried to keep busy with pointless tasks, wiping down already clean counters, reorganizing spices, folding laundry that was already neat. Anything to drown out the thoughts creeping in. But my mind kept drifting to him. By 2 p.m., I realized I hadn't seen Ethan all morning. Had he left? Was he avoiding me? Relief tangled with a strange disappointment in my chest. I scolded myself for even caring. I needed space to clear my head before I did something I couldn't take back. I sank onto the living room couch, hoping a bit of TV would pull me out of my head. But just as I grabbed the remote, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I glanced over, and there was Ethan at the bottom, watching me. He looked like he'd been lost in thought, his hands gripping the banister, as if he wasn't sure whether to come closer. My heart sped up. "You're avoiding me," I blurted out, instantly wishing I could take it back. "I thought that's what you wanted," he said, his voice calm but guarded. I swallowed hard. I don't know what's going on with us." He stepped forward, his expression steady but purposeful. "I think you do." I let out a sharp breath, my hands clenching in my lap. "Ethan, we can't." "Why not?" he cut in, his voice soft but steady, his eyes fixed on mine. "You act like you don't feel it, but I know you do." "I feel it too." I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out because he was right. I felt it, and pretending otherwise only made it stronger. He took another step closer, and I knew I should have stood up, put space between us, and shut this down for good. But I stayed frozen, unable to move. "You're afraid," Ethan said, his voice softer now. "Not because this is wrong, but because you're not sure you can pull yourself back from it." My breath hitched, caught in my throat. Ethan, before I could find the words, he was right there, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. My heart pounded wildly. "I won't push you into anything you don't want," he said quietly, his eyes steady and searching. "But you've got to be real with yourself." I shut my eyes, trying to shove down the feelings bubbling up inside me. This wasn't just about temptation, it was about the pull between us that I'd been fighting so hard to pretend didn't exist. When I opened my eyes, he was still there, watching, waiting for me to say something, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to give him the answer he deserved. The air around us was heavy, charged with unspoken tension. Neither of us spoke, neither of us moved, like we were both afraid to break the moment. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst, like it was trying to scream a warning I already understood. I should have stepped away, told him to leave, told him we had to let this go. But I stayed rooted, my breath shallow, my hands pressed against my thighs to steady myself. Ethan's gaze didn't waver, waiting for a signal, permission, maybe, or just a hint that I wanted this as much as he did. And that was the problem, I did want it, but wanting didn't make it okay. I stood up, forcing out a shaky laugh that sounded more nervous than light. This is crazy, isn't it? His jaw tightened just a bit, but he didn't back off. You don't really think that, he said. I swallowed hard. Ethan, we can't, because it doesn't feel wrong to you, he cut in. My breath caught, the words tangling in my throat. It wasn't about right or wrong, it was about what would happen if we let this go any further, the kind of choices you can't unmake. I shook my head. It doesn't matter what I feel. We just can't. He let out a slow breath through his nose, his face unreadable for a long moment. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched me with a quiet patience that twisted my insides. Finally, like he'd made up his mind, he stepped back. Okay. I blinked, startled by the sudden space between us, the emptiness it left. Okay, he said again, nodding, his expression guarded. If you really think we should pretend this is nothing, I'll let it go. I won't bring it up again. Relief should have flooded through me, like a weight lifting off my shoulders, knowing he was giving me an out, a way to escape this dangerous pull. But instead, I felt a dull ache settle in my chest. I nodded slowly, ignoring the pang of disappointment in my gut. That's the right call. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. Sure. He turned and headed for the stairs without another word. I didn't stop him or call out. I just stood there, watching him disappear, the heaviness of something unresolved pressing down on me. After that, the house felt different. The silence wasn't just thick, it was suffocating. Ethan kept his distance, not cold or mean, but far enough away that I felt the void in every corner of the house. I told myself this was what I wanted, the smart choice. But every time I caught him glancing at me from across a room, his eyes guarded, I wondered if smart was worth the cost. The days that followed were too quiet, almost eerie. Ethan kept his promise, he didn't bring it up, didn't push, didn't cross any lines. But the space between us was heavy, buzzing with all the things we weren't saying. I should have been grateful, relieved that he'd backed off. But instead, I felt something else, something that rattled me more than the guilt I thought I'd feel. I missed it. I missed the intensity of his gaze, the way he pushed me to face what was happening instead of hiding from it. Without him near, the house felt hollow. The days dragged on, and I caught myself waiting for something I'd already sworn couldn't happen. I threw myself into distractions, running errands I didn't need to, finding excuses to be anywhere but home with my thoughts. When I was there, I kept busy, cooking meals nobody asked for, scrubbing floors that were already spotless. But nothing worked. Deep down, I knew the truth, I wanted him. And knowing he'd let it go, that he'd stopped pushing, didn't make it easier. It made it worse, because now I was the one wondering what if. I was the one fighting the urge to cross the line I'd drawn so clearly. One night, after a day of dodging him as much as he'd been dodging me, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, trying to lose myself in the steady rush of water instead of the restlessness churning inside me. When I turned, there he was, leaning in the doorway. I froze, my hands gripping the sink's edge. Everything okay? I asked, keeping my voice steady even as my pulse raced. Not really, he said, his face unreadable. Just thought you might be done hiding from me. I swallowed hard. I'm not hiding. He raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. Sure, that's why you barely said a word to me in days. I turned back to the sink, scrubbing a plate that didn't need it. I just think it's better this way. Do you? He stepped into the kitchen, closer now, not too close, but enough to make me feel the weight of his presence. Because it doesn't seem like you do. I shut off the faucet, letting out a slow breath before turning to face him. Ethan, we made a decision. No, he said smoothly, cutting in. You made a decision. I just didn't argue. I pressed my lips together, my hands clutching the counter. Isn't that the same thing? Not even close. His eyes locked onto mine, steady and searching. You want me to pretend there's nothing here, but I know better. And you do too. A chill raced down my back, but I stood my ground. Feeling something doesn't mean we have to act on it, I said firmly. Ethan stepped closer, near enough that I could see the spark of defiance in his eyes, the frustration simmering just below. Then why haven't you walked away yet? I opened my mouth to respond, but the words dissolved, because anything I said would only unravel the fragile control I was clinging to. He tilted his head, giving me one last chance to push him back. But I didn't, and that silence spoke louder than any words could. The moment stretched, taut and heavy, both of us frozen, afraid to breathe too deeply. His gaze pinned me, daring me to be the one to break. And maybe I already had, maybe I'd been crumbling bit by bit, until all that was left was the pull I couldn't escape. I could have turned away. I could have pushed past him, ended this before it took hold. But I stayed, my heart racing, my breath shallow, waiting for him to say something that would force me to choose a path I wasn't ready for. You don't want me to leave, he said finally, his voice low but certain. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping the counter's edge. Ethan, this can't, don't tell me it's wrong, he cut in. You don't believe that. I let out a sharp breath, closing my eyes for a moment. It's not about what I believe. It's about what's right. He stepped closer, the space between us shrinking to nothing. Does this feel wrong to you? I couldn't answer, because we both knew it didn't. It felt like something that had been building forever, no matter how hard I'd tried to push it away. Stop pretending, he said softly. His words sent a tremor through me. My resolve was slipping, crumbling like dry sand. The air buzzed with something electric, dangerous, and I knew the line we'd drawn before was gone. Tell me to go, he said, his voice gentler now. And I'll walk away. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself face what had been growing between us, the tension, the stolen glances, the way my pulse spiked when he was near. It was all there, impossible to deny. But I couldn't tell him to go, because I didn't want him to. And that was all he needed to know. By not sending him away, I'd crossed the line. The tension wasn't just there anymore, it was everything, swallowing us whole before we could stop it. My heart pounded as he stood so close, yet still holding back, giving me one last chance to change my mind. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Ethan's breathing was steady, his hands still at his sides, controlled. I could feel the heat of him, my skin alive with the awareness that this was it, the moment everything shifted. I stepped back just enough to catch my breath, but not enough to break the connection. There's no coming back from this, I whispered. I don't want to come back, he said without hesitation. And with that, the last shred of my resistance broke. I'd spent too long pretending, too long fighting something that had already taken root. Every reason, every argument for why this was wrong collapsed under the weight of what pulled us together. I'd told myself that avoiding him, ignoring the way his eyes lingered, would make it fade. But I'd been lying to myself. Ethan closed the gap, his fingers brushing my arm, light and tentative, waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I lifted my gaze, searching his eyes, knowing that once I moved, once I gave in, there was no undoing it. And then I did. The world blurred, reason slipping away like water through my hands. For the first time in months, I stopped overthinking, stopped fighting, stopped caring about what came next. Time shifted after that. Moments bled into days, and days into something else entirely. I couldn't stop myself from wanting more, from finding ways to be near him, to share the same space where this unspoken connection had been simmering for too long. But reality always finds a way to creep back in, no matter how hard you try to keep it out. It was a Thursday afternoon, the house still and quiet. My husband had come home the night before, oblivious to the change in the air, the secret that had taken hold in his own home. He kissed my cheek as he headed out for tennis, his touch familiar but somehow distant. The guilt should have crushed me. It should have torn apart the fragile world I'd built. But it didn't, and that scared me more than anything. Ethan was in the living room when I walked in, his posture casual but his eyes sharp, reading me too well, as always. He didn't need to say it, I knew he could see the storm inside me. "We can't keep this up," I said softly, my words feeling empty, brittle. He watched me for a long moment before nodding, but there was no real agreement in it. "I know." The silence stretched, heavy with all we couldn't say. I turned to go, but his voice stopped me. "Do you regret it?" I should have said yes. I should have seized that moment to end it, to wipe away what had happened before it destroyed everything. But when I looked back at him, my answer was written all over my face. "No." He nodded once, his jaw tight. "Me neither." And with that, the truth settled between us, solid and unyielding. I didn't regret it. Not then, maybe not ever. But that didn't make it easier, because some choices don't wrap up neatly. Some choices linger, haunting every moment, reminding you that once you've crossed a line, there's no going back, only forward into whatever comes next.
Bye-bye.